You said 18 if you're before 37.
Yeah.
Are we ready?
Nancy, just one more minute. I'm just seeing Jim Dyke and Emily O'Quinn. Here's Emily.
Emily worked at the committee for a whole hour, so they needed just a restroom, right?
Yes. They'll have her on the shop. If you know what they did at the Oscar, that was funny. No, you're not having a shop. I know, that's a long drive too. You don't even shot tequila with it Washington County line.
Okay. Madam Chair, I think it's okay for you to go ahead and get started. It's 1:06.
Thank you. You all know how I like to get meetings started on time, so I appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call our meeting to order. Thank you all for being with us today. Unfortunately, we ran into some scheduling difficulties at the last minute, and late yesterday, Sarah and I were chatting and realized that we won't have a physical quorum at our meeting. It was last minute. We know scheduling issues come up, but once that happened, I also made the decision to join by Zoom or Teams or whatever we have today, rather than make the long trek down 81. So we will call the roll, but I want you to be aware that we are unlikely to take any actions today. We'll have a robust discussion. There's a lot to talk about. And then we'll figure out a time quickly where we can have an expedient path forward so that action items are scheduled and we can let everyone know how they can move forward promptly. Before we do the roll call, I would like to welcome and make you aware of several new members of our board. First of all is Mr. Jim Chung, who previously served as the Secretary of Commerce and Trade during the McDonald administration, and more recently has served as a member of the Go Virginia Region 9 Council, including serving as the chair from 2019 to 2020. You all probably know Jim, and he probably needs no introduction. But quickly, I'll tell you that Jim certainly has a background in entrepreneurial ecosystems. He co-founded and co-chaired the CAV Angels, an angel investment club for UVA alum. Jim has invested in over 40 startups in various industries and has himself advised a variety of startup companies. We're delighted to have Jim join our board. Speaker of the House, Don Scott, is also coming to our board. Speaker Scott has served on the state legislature for several years, as you know, and he brings with him a background in economic development, including previously serving as Senior Vice President for Workforce Operations at KRA Corporation and as chair of the phenomenal Portsmouth Economic Development Authority. When I met with Speaker Scott during the session, I'll tell you, he was so enthusiastic and delighted to be joining our board. Had a lot of good things to say, shared his enthusiasm, but also was very practical and had some insightful questions and asked for the JLARC report. I think he's going to be a fantastic member of our board. Delegate Luke Torian, chair of the House Committee on Appropriations, is also joining us. Perhaps I should say rejoining us. You all probably know Delegate Torian. He has a diverse background working with both the business community and the not-for-profit community. Just a few of the ways Delegate Torian has served the Commonwealth are as chair of Virginia's Minority Business Commission and vice chair of the Major Employment and Investment Project Approval Committee. outside of his commitment to the Commonwealth at large, Delegate Torian has served as a community leader in a variety of roles, including with the Dumfries Creative and Performing Arts Center, Boys and Girls Club, and as a founder of Virginia's Organized for Interfaith Community Engagement. As I said, he is no stranger to our board, having served previously, and he is delighted to be joining us. Senator Louise Lucas will also be joining us. Senator Lucas chairs the important Senate Committee on Finance and Appropriations. And she has a quite remarkable background serving both Hampton Roads and the Commonwealth at large. Senator Lucas was one of the first women to ever graduate from the apprentice program at the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, going on to become the first female ship fitter ever. Pretty amazing. In her service to the Commonwealth, Senator Lucas has served on commissions such as the Commission for State Funding for Public School Construction and the Governor's Commission on Information Technology. She has served on several community boards and commissions, such as the Golden Heritage member and is a past member of the NAACP and is a charter member of the Martin Luther King Leadership Steering Committee. I met with Senator Lucas during the session and talked to her about Go Virginia, and she is so excited to become a member of our board, said that she has been waiting for a long time to be involved in a meaningful way, and we are looking forward to having her on the board as well. So welcome to all of our new members. Now, let's do the roll call, but first, let me explain that per our electronic participation policy, I received several requests over the last several weeks for some members to participate remotely. And while this meeting is not projected to have a physical quorum, as I mentioned, I do want to recognize members who have received approval to participate today remotely, and those are John King, Kenneth Johnson, and Bill Holtzman, and myself. And this will be noted in the minutes of our meeting. So Cody, would you mind conducting a roll call?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Agee.
Here.
Delegate Alston.
Present, but I may not be able to stay on the whole time, but I'm here.
Thank you, Mr. Alston.
Thank you.
Mr. Chang. Here. Secretary Cummings.
Present.
Mr. Davenport. Here. Mr. Dyke.
Here.
Mr. Fleet. Mr. Fralin. Ms. Frema. Speaker Scott. Mr. Holtzman. Mr. Holtzman. Mr. Johnson.
Present.
Delegate Kilgore. Mr. King.
Here.
Senator Lucas. Secretary Merrick. Ms. O'Quinn.
Here.
Mr. Peterson. Mr. Stottlemyre.
Here.
Delegate Torian. And Ms. Trigion.
I'm here.
Madam Chair, you do not have a quorum.
Thank you, Cody. I know we're all disappointed that we don't have a quorum, but we certainly understand this busy time of year and the legislature just having finished over the weekend. But we will, with haste, find a way to finish up our action items quickly. So at this time, we would like to open the floor for comments from the public. Cody, can you please recognize anyone from the public who has signed up to provide comments?
Madam Chair, we had nobody in person here wishing to make comments, but we may have some online.
All right. Is there anyone online who would like to make comment?
Madam Chair, I don't see anybody reaching out in chat or raising their hand to indicate that they would like to participate in public comment.
Thank you,
I do have
Cody.
written comment.
Well, as I was about to say, thank you, that we do have a means for the public to comment in writing. So if you have any of those comments, Cody, would you share them with us?
Yes, ma'am. I have a lady by the name of Abby Wicker. She represents Stafford County Public Schools. And her comment is in regards to the staff appeal of staff decision on an ECB that you're going to discuss here shortly. Her comments are, we humbly request an appeal to the denial of our Igniting Entrepreneurship grant request. Stafford schools and other supported divisions depend on curated content to generate significant sustainable results. Collaborating with Jason Learning is vital for instilling entrepreneurial skills in students, crucial for bridging talent shortages identified in the GOVA Growth and Diversification Plan, and critical for fostering future economic leaders in our region as Go Virginia's strategic goals envision. Madam Chair, that is the conclusion of the written public comment.
Thank you, Cody. Next is our consent agenda, and the only thing on our consent agenda are our minutes from our December 12th meeting, and we'll take action on this at our next meeting. Next, you may recall, as a part of the new board structure that we adopted in December with the bylaws revision, and once again, thank you, Pia, for the heavy lift there to redo our bylaws. We have a slightly different process for election of officers. And for this item, I'd like to recognize the chair of our Governance and Policy Committee, Emily O'Quinn, to report on the committee recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our committee met earlier today, and after deliberation, the committee is recommending Leah Freemal for the position of the Chair of Regional Councils. And as you know, the position of Vice Chair of Regional Councils is charged with the coordination and oversight of the work of the regional councils, including the development of strategies to ensure communication between the board and the regional councils, the creation of synergy among the regions, and inviting feedback from regional councils to ensure alignment in direction and strategies between the board and the council. These councils have diverse memberships from local government officials to not-for-profit entities and private sector industry leaders. And to that end, a successful vice chair of the regional councils must possess exceptional communication skills, as Linda does, with all facets of the economic development community. Her background as a leader in the community development financial institutions uniquely positions her to undertake this challenge. As the former vice president of community innovation at Virginia Community Capital, and as the current president and CEO of Bridging Virginia, as well as holding memberships on the Chamber RVA Board and Virginia Tech Center of Economic and Community Engagement Advisory Board, Leah has a demonstrated track record of engagement with these diverse memberships that will allow her to more than excel in this role.
Thank you, Emily, and thanks to your committee. That's an excellent choice. And thanks to Leah for her willingness to serve. Once again, we can't take action on our nominations, and we will schedule a vote at our next meeting. Having said that, I'm sure Leah is anxious to get to work, and I'm really excited about this new role in our organizational structure. I think that the maturation of our organization has reached a point where we've got very thoughtful regional councils. And they likewise are maturing, and there's a lot of opportunity for improved communication and, importantly, the synergies across our councils. So very excited about this. I want to thank Emily and her committee, and also thank Leah again. Well, now let's turn to the Deputy Director's report. While we won't be taking action today, we have a lot to talk about. And I'd like to ask Sarah to provide a brief overview of the projects. And as we move forward, again, we'll we'll have a meeting soon, probably a virtual meeting, so that we can take actions on these various things. So Sarah, will you please present your report?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. This is a light agenda in terms of applications. We have 2 proposals to speak with you today to take action. 2 out of the 9 regions participated in this particular grant cycle. The industry clusters that are target focused for this batch, if you will, is IT and emerging technologies, advanced manufacturing, business services, and IT data. In terms of investment strategies, these are both in the workforce development category. And I think if I were to look at trends, recent trends, I'd say talent development is really an area of high emphasis for all of the regions. And I think that makes sense given the critically low unemployment rate, labor shortages that are facing employers. And I think really looking for strategies to increase the pool of qualified workers to support the growth and expansion of industry in Virginia. Next slide, please. I want to remind everyone of the application review process. I think it's important for new members and old that all of these applications, before they're received by DHCD and the work groups for subsequent review, have been vetted and approved by the regional council. So once that support organization submits that information to DHCD's grant management system, my team simply reviews it to make sure it adheres with program requirements and that we have all the documentation needed to support you in making a qualified decision. The work groups include members of the Virginia State Board and subject matter experts, of course, and we would like to thank John King and Todd Stadelmeyer for committing a half a day of their very, very busy schedules to be with us as a part of this review. We also had Sean Terrell with the Reynolds Community College and Jesse Fritz, who's a senior business manager at BDP in their talent division, join us for that meeting as well. So we can go ahead and move forward with our applications. We're back just one. Who's controlling the slides here? Oh, thank you. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Just like we practiced. All right. The first application should look familiar to you because this was an application that was deferred at a prior.
I didn't see this one.
Okay, my apologies. I think it was recommended for some improvements. And so the region did submit it, but elected to pull it back so that they could further refine their proposal. My apologies. It's called Developing IT and Cybersecurity Certification Pipeline to Advance Cluster Growth. The work group actually reviewed this application and Todd and John were both on that committee. So that's why it looks familiar to all of us. It does have broad regional collaboration, in particular the participating localities, which are listed on your slide. Montgomery County, Pulaski, and Radford are all participating as an advisory capacity. And the applicant is Radford University. But I'd like to just speak a bit more on collaboration behind this application, because not only is Radford University really looking to be the lead on this particular project, there's a lot of collaboration from Virginia Tech and the community college in the area, and I'll describe what they're aspiring to do. So they're going to increase the number of certified credentialed, if you will, workers to support the information technology industry, and they're putting a particular focus on cybersecurity and other kind of subspecialty areas. So for folks that aren't familiar, these industry recognized credentials, in some industries, they're not nice to have, they are must have. And I really think that they are looking to focus on the must-haves and also to develop curriculum that better prepares students to achieve this level of credentialing and certification. It is going to establish a Pearson VUE testing center at Radford University. And Pearson is recognized. These are proctored, seated exams. And they are where someone takes the classroom learning and actually gets the credential that in some cases just flat out makes them employable in a field like cybersecurity, but definitely improves their skills. And it's not just available for students. Really, the whole information technology workforce in Region 2 will be able to, with the support of their employer, oftentimes go and get a credential, if you will, at the Pearson View Center. So first and foremost, it's going to establish this new testing lab and also going to help communicate the need, the demand for certificates and credentials to students and help employers understand how to better access students who hold them. They're also going to work through a regional talent connector program. Go Virginia funds are going to be used to support renovations and equipment for the Pearson View Training Center, program outreach, other indirect costs. The match for the project includes salaries for the Pearson View Testing Center staff. And that cost will be borne primarily by Bradford University, and they are engaging other partners like the Roanoke-Blacksburg Technology Council in this effort as well. The outcomes, and again, we track outcomes just over the period of the grant, which is a 24-month period. 104 credentials awarded, newly credentialed workers, 15 different businesses served directly by this effort. And based on the work group discussion and the application review, we are recommending this project for approval at a level request of $202,872. Next slide.
So you can't add jobs to that outcomes? Anticipated jobs?
So I think that we do have in the return on investment calculation and at the actual program performance and evaluation committee this morning, we talked about core performance outcomes. For a workforce project, we are aligning with the Secretary of Labor's new core outcomes for the workforce system. Now, Co-Virginia isn't a workforce program in and of itself, but working to drive similar outcomes. So they don't use new jobs, they do use job placements. And so you will see that on the menu of core outcome measures for talent development projects.
So the match waiver, they use that?
Yes.
This is, I think for me, the first project as we come through with that new process we've put in place. Can you just expand on the nature of the waiver and for this project?
Yep, absolutely. So I'm going to need to look at the application and the budget, but we are also as staff recommending the approval of the match waiver.
It's great to see that being utilized. So
Yeah.
no more.
And we saw it with the applications during the last round, and I think it was used pretty effectively. So the total match waiver, right, there's two different types of match waiver. 50% of the participating localities, which include the city of Bradford, Pulaski County, meet DEP's definition for economic double distress. As it relates to the local match waiver, they have indicated that 50% or more of the participating localities have fiscal stress. Remember, we use the fiscal stress index, rated as high or above average, and that includes the city of Bradford, Montgomery County, and Pulaski County. Thank you. Thanks for the question. Okay, and again, we are not going to be able to take action on these today. I just share with you the staff recommendation we're for. All right, next slide. Region 3, GoTech Region 3 expansion. Participating localities include Brunswick County and Henry County. The applicant is the Institute for Advanced Learning and Research, or IALR. This group is familiar with GoTech. It's probably one of the most scaled talent development or workforce development initiatives in Go Virginia's history. In this case, they are going to be implementing modules that will help to support and expand the advanced manufacturing industry, business services, and IT. And the goal, of course, here is to increase the pool of qualified workers. This project actually has a four-part strategy, and I want to lay them out to you individually because it'll be important as we move forward. The first is a expansion. So it's going to add 2 new career connection labs, one in Henry County and one in Brunswick County. These are new career connection labs, and again, are going to focus on those 2 modules, advanced manufacturing and information technology. For folks that are not familiar, this is an experience that a middle school student would encounter. It's about career exploration. And I like to say this is the farm team, right? We're for advanced manufacturing. And I'd say Region 3 and the other GoTech regions are doing a very thoughtful job of saying, what is the pathway? What's the educational pathway, if you will, the end goal, helping these individuals become employees in those industries. So the first part is the Career Connections Lab and expansion. The second is adding a 9th and 10th grade bridge pilot program in Henry County. There is an academic bridge or a chasm. So students get this experience around career exploration in middle school. 9th and 10th grade, there is a limited amount of programming available before the career technical education, right, kicks in. So we've got this project and one out in Southwest Virginia, Region 1, piloting a bridge program to make sure that those interest levels stay high and students continue to develop relevant skills to prepare them for the workforce. The pilot approach would bridge that gap, and a portion of the project is proposed to make up $225,000 of the matching funds that you see listed here, with the majority of the cost going towards equipment and supplies. The project also proposes adding equipment used for currently taught modules in 16 middle schools with existing GoTech career exploration labs. It would involve adding augmented reality welding equipment to the curriculum and adding Arduino units for the IT programming and coding curriculum. A portion of the project comprises $121,000 of the total $489,000 request. Lastly, the project proposes adding welding tools and supplies at Patrick Henry Community College for an existing welding program, which admittedly has been recently expanded. $50,000 roughly are going to be used to pay for welding packs that include personal protective equipment and welding supplies for 88 welding students. A portion of the project also proposes $51,000 in matching funds, which includes and the potential for welding scholarships for tuition. Go Virginia funds are going to be used for equipment, supplies, outreach, grant administration, and related indirect costs. The matching funds are primarily coming from teacher salaries, supplies, and equipment for the Career Connection Labs. Again, these are contributed by the local school divisions in support of the project. And of course, we've described the community college's match contribution a little bit different. Outcomes associated with this, they estimate that as many as 488 students will be trained, 300 of them in the middle school Career Connection Labs that we've mentioned, 100 in that bridge program, and finally 88 as part of the community college welding component. They estimate that as many as 56 credentials would be awarded. Again, that will happen at the community college level. That doesn't happen in middle school. So GoTech is really a middle school experience. This is the long game as it relates to workforce training and education. And it will establish 2 new GoTech middle school labs. So I've described the 4 project elements. Based on the work group discussion and application review, staff recommends this project for approval at a reduced amount of $302,689.55. This would be inclusive of the new Career Connection Lab, the 9th and 10th grade pilot program, as well as any indirect or administrative rates for the grantee and sub-grantee. And let me just tell you, kind of the decision-making process, and maybe some of the members on the committee could add to that. The equipment at the existing Career Connection Labs, Go Virginia has always envisioned itself as making catalytic investments that would then be sustained by the regions. And so it was certainly, I think, a good discussion for the board to talk about replacement, replenishment, even in this case, I think responding to shifting industry demand. How was that going to happen on an ongoing basis? Because I don't know that Go Virginia was ever envisioned to be that continued source of funding. And with regards to the community college component, which is one of the pieces that the work group agreed would perhaps not be appropriate, does not represent any new or expanded training capacity. It is equipment for 88 students, which has been explained to us, can be reused multiple times. But it is not new or expanded training capacity. It is just to support students in their process work through an existing program. So I'll leave it there. And Todd and John, I don't know if you guys wanted to add anything.
Yeah, this is John King. I think, Sarah, you touched on it pretty well, but one of the things we asked a lot of questions in the work group, particularly on the changing technologies. Are we buying something and that we've already purchased? It was explained on the welding and the different types and of the program and how there was a need for that. And so I think we got beyond that. But then when it got into a lot of the work groups that I've been part of lately has been talking about the sustainability. And so, then it gets real technical as to what's your definition of something that's consumable versus durable. And really, we wanted to find a way to support the program and, but this specifically with the replenishment of the packs, the fact that some of that equipment was going to definitely, I guess there's a targeted time frame of about 3 years or so that those are expected to last. So is that really durable in terms of Go Virginia? And while that was debatable, the question came back to, but if these are going to supply a program that's already in place, and in this case we felt like some of that was, then was that necessarily adding capacity, adding additional? So I think it was a way to, again, facilitate the program overall, but try to not support something that would put us in a situation in the future where we're saying, well, we're doing something that we haven't traditionally done as a board. Does that make sense?
It does, John, and thanks for that. I don't know if Todd has anything else he wants to add to your comments.
No.
Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I did, for those of you on that, just to get Davenport. So I think probably the Go Check is something that K through 12 has either got to adopt or not. And it's something that, because as it expands across the Commonwealth of Virginia, either it is an important part of education or it isn't. And I think all of us involved in the workforce area are excited. The ones that know about GoCheck are excited about children in middle school, when you are really a formative time in a child's time of life, where you can impress them. I mean, I've been in these labs and see the excitement in children that you say, I can't believe they're excited about this. But they get excited about trade. And so, and I know for a fact that 95% of them would never be exposed to a trade, but for this exposure. All right, so we know that we have a really a big shortage of people in the trades, and it's just getting worse. So I don't know what to this point, the Department of Education has not chosen, which hasn't included it as part and parcel of their programs that are approved, that right, Steve?
I don't know.
Okay. You're shaking your head, I thought maybe you do. Anyway, but I mean, the Commonwealth is going to have to step up, or either we're going to have to be funded in Go Virginia, and to the point of because this isn't expanding. I mean, now it goes all across the different, at least all across the school districts across the southern border of Virginia. which is from Bristol all the way to Tidewater. And we have demand for it going on up into many other parts of Virginia. So it's getting ready to just, it's busting at the seams. And so it's a great program. You know, I wish all of you could experience it, and, because you'd see this. The ninth grade and the 10th grade are critical, because if you get them excited and you don't keep them excited, then by the time they get to vocational education in the 11th and 12th grade, you've lost a bunch of them. And so this 9th and 10th grade, I am so happy to see that being added into this whole thing. But Virginia has a chance to really set itself apart in doing this. And I mean, I have watched people from Europe who we were recruiting to come to our region, come into one of these labs and say, you got it. This is what we do in Europe, and this is why we have our trades are so good, or so filled with workers. So I say that to editorialize that I would hope that we can get this thing into the state budget and can be supportive of it. And as far as this part about the flaw that was in as far as these reusables and so forth, I hope that I mean, we're going to have some time now, I guess, to talk about it a little bit more before the next meeting, but I hope they'll be able to raise the money some other way if that's what is necessary to make that project work. But all that can be said.
And Ben, I think that's, I'm sorry.
No, you go
I
ahead,
just-
John. I'm not.
Well, I was just gonna say, Ben, I think, you know, to echo your point, that's where the work group came in. One of the, if I remember correctly, I'm looking at my notes, one of the first things that, we made note of was the success of GoTech and the partnership that Go Virginia has had in the past with that group. And then the other piece was the fact that this was a trade that we know is in high demand across the state. And, you know, immediately raised an awareness flag for all of us when we could say, you know, obviously this is an area we've seen a need, we've heard a need, and we think it's to try to figure out a way to make this program work really is to our advantage and would speak well for Go Virginia.
Yeah, Go Virginia needs to be applauded, because I mean, Go Virginia stepped out on this early on. This has been going on now for several years. And I think if it's not the premier thing that we can say that we've accomplished in this project, it's certainly among the best investments.
Thanks for all that, Ben. You know, I think you brought up a good point though, and that is that while we've been the catalyst for this and been hugely supportive and can take a lot of pride in that, we now think that the education system needs to incorporate the trades in a meaningful way. And maybe what we could do is have that conversation with the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Labor, and see where their head is and what we can do to forward this in a more meaningful way that's embedded in an education and not always having to come through a grant that's Go Virginia. Would you agree with that?
Got a couple of questions here, Jim.
Oh, yeah, ma'am, sure, just a quick question. Because I'm new, so I didn't see the prior one, but this came through originally as a Go Virginia grant, right?
That's right.
Did their sustainability plan like foresee the need in 3 years to like replace these packs and everything like that? I'm just wondering what the follow-up is or anything like that. But I also agree that, and this could be Secretary of Labor's Dolly, not Dolly. Yeah, whoever has the apprenticeship program, they should get more funding to do things like this, because definitely we need a lot more of the trades, especially the welding trades all across the state. We know that there's a big deficit of people, but just, was there a foreseeability in the original application for sustainability? Because I know we have to justify it.
Yeah, so we actually went back and reviewed all of the preceding, all of the prior applications. And, we felt this one made a pretty strong commitment to providing ongoing support for GoTech. I don't think that the question of equipment replenishment or replacement was addressed specifically, but it was through a combination of public and private resources. It was expected these programs would be sustained in the future. I think it's important that this body remember that it is kind of a hybrid board, right? It is a policy board. And when you look at roles and responsibilities, one of them is to make policy recommendations to the governor. So it may be appropriate at this time with this particular project being GoTech, to learn a bit more about it and to be able to speak about the impact of the GoTech initiative and help to advocate for some consistent permanent funding. The second item has to do with career exploration, and Jim, you know this, it gets defined, right? And what qualifies as a qualified career exploration activity also gets defined. In my review of the criteria for that particular designation, I think this is a very good fit, and I think it could advance, if you will, the adoption of GoTech as a statewide model. So those are two separate questions that could be answered. But I do think at this point, with the level of investment Go Virginia has made in GoTech, it would be appropriate for this board to lean in a little bit in terms of its policy recommendation, flex, if you will.
Thank you. My thought was share and echo what Chair said about the recommendation, and also what you just said, Sarah, about policy recommendation, but also this group can be a convener of the people who are at the tip of the spear, so to speak, of the issue. The Secretary of Education, the people who are behind GoTech, and people from this board. The notion has been from day one to have scalable projects. This is the ultimate in scalable projects. I mean, this probably has been the most successful in proving that point and that requirement that has been part of the review of these projects. And it's time now to let the bird out of the nest. The chickadee needs to fly and to find a way to sustain that. Remind me, because I think the Secretary of Education used to be on this board. Initially, the initial board had.
She's not now. She's come to sit in, and she said she's actually would like to be on this board.
She was, former Secretary of Education.
Yeah, but Secretary Gadara has come a couple times.
The Secretary of Education has been initially, my recollection
She is one of the governors. She is a gubernatorial appointee. There are three cabinet level officials. One is Secretary of Commerce and Trade, the second is Secretary of Finance, and the governor can choose between two, the Secretary of Education or natural resources or agriculture.
But she's not been picked for this. She's not been.
No,
She and I have talked about this exact topic, and she's interested, so we should just make that happen.
well, I have spoken numerous times and sent memos directly to the governor's staff.
Okay, I'll do that.
And it may just, again, I know there's a lot of appointments to make. But I do think, and I do reach out. I do reach out to Secretary Gadara, and I think there's some of her staff, maybe you reach out to her.
Sure.
Don't talk about her when she's got a.
Hi, everyone. Zach Jacobs. I'm the Assistant Secretary of Education, but yes, Secretary is very interested in this. I think she was at one point, or still is listed on the website as a member. But she could not be here today, but that's why she sent me. So she does want to be engaged more on this. So
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Tell her that we were talking about.
Yeah. I had to make sure
Yeah, first, I'd just like to echo everything Ben said, how important this program is, and put it in some perspective. You may recall we had some legislation enacted last year consolidating our workforce training program, which was based on a recommendation that was made 32 years ago when I was Secretary of Education, and we issued our Workforce 2000 plan, which this was back in 1990, I think it was. And one of the things we referenced was something you alluded to, and that is the fact that if you look at what they do in Europe and in other areas, they get folks basically exposed to these things in middle school and even earlier, so that they can decide what kind of career path they'd like to get into as they go through the educational system. So I think it's a great program. I think it's a great concept. I alluded to earlier, I was speaking to Secretary Slater before I came in, and one of the things we talked about was sort of the CTE program, what we need to do to get more people involved in vocations and the job opportunities that are available, and doing it at a much earlier stage. In middle school, as you said, is an ideal place to do that. So I think it's a great idea. Since I'm rotating off this board in June, and I have, nothing else to do, I'd be happy to try to work with Secretary Badera and Secretary Slater, because this is right at the heart of what we've been talking about in workforce training and getting the pipeline going. And I think there's a lot we can do from a policy perspective, and also bring in the state superintendent, who I think would be very enthusiastic about this if we could show that this was something that we felt very strongly about. So to the extent I can be helpful to you in this regard, I'm more than happy to do that.
Jim, for the words of Hotel California, you can check out and never leave. We did, just to your point, we had John says, we had a very good, robust conversation about scalability and also sustainability with this. And this again was a very, very engaged group. And so you were supportive, and then we had further conversation about the sustainability.
Well, I think Jim Dyke just got himself a job, so we're going to lean on him to lead us into that convening of these various important people at the state level. And I think Sarah's right. We need to, as a policy entity, we can advise the governor. So more to come between now and our next meeting. I think this is a bit larger than welding. It's about the trades in general and how we can double down on developing the traded sector beginning in middle school. So a lot to be accomplished here. Sarah, anything else?
One other comment in the room is.
Yeah, one other additional point of fact, that you reminded me about that, welding being the center of that. We've just got a new board member here, Senator Lucas, who I think would be an excellent person to get engaged in this, to advocate for us moving in this direction. So we should bring her into that discussion as well.
Well, I think that.
Great idea.
First lab is open, in Region 5, and there's a lot of interest from the Navy. So I think I think to have a very focused conversation about GoTech and scalability in the future, would be really exciting. And maybe we could get ILR and Region 3 to host a meeting so that folks could see and experience that. That was of interest.
She said field trip there. I said, I thought Vince said we're going to Europe. She said, no.
Well,
You're there in Europe when you're learning.
yeah. And I really think we need to do it. Because, I mean, I would hope that we could get the Secretary of Education to join us. Yeah. Well, no, she's been there. She's seen it. So, I mean, she gets it. It's just doing it. I mean, it's just doing it.
I think this is a great group to help advance that discussion, and I think ILR would appreciate that.
And we'd love to host the board.
Okay.
I think
and again,
that'll be great. And I just also want to say, as Sarah mentioned, she's talked to the governor's staff. I've talked to the governor. We do need that appointment made, if he'd be interested. And of course, at the JLARC report, we talked about the Secretary of Labor as well. So we have 3 other secretaries who'd like to be on Go Virginia. We just need the governor to help make that appointment. Anything else, Sarah?
no, that's all, Madam Chair.
If we're ready to move to our next agenda item, I want to make sure there's no more conversation about this one. Great conversation. The next item is an appeal request that was mentioned in the written public comment on a staff decision for a planning grant application. And as y'all recall, we allow the staff to make decisions for funding amounts of $100,000 or less. And in this case, staff chose not to approve an application, and the regional council has requested that we take a second look. Sarah, would you walk us through this?
Sure, absolutely. The application I would like to discuss is a planning grant that falls in a combination of categories, and really startup ecosystem is one way to look at this, because definitely the curriculum they proposed to develop would have supported entrepreneurism among students who experienced it. The second is considering this as a workforce development application, because this is education or a learning activity that would occur in the K-12 environment. In that case, Stafford County Public Schools was requesting $100,000 to prepare high school students in Region 8 with higher paying jobs by helping them develop the skills to become entrepreneurs by creating a localized curriculum to teach entrepreneurship across high school. Jason Learning was the educational partner. They're a nonprofit curriculum development, and they were going to be employed to develop that curriculum. The staff recommendation, the rationale behind that was twofold. First, the Region 6 Council approved a regional entrepreneurship initiative project, remember an REI, to develop really a strategic roadmap for the startup ecosystem in Region 6. And that project has not been completed to inform the development of this proposal. And secondly, the project is an effort to bolster interest in entrepreneurship among high school students. And while these do have values, the segment of the population targeted by this effort, the line of sight to business creation, is perhaps a little farther away than its typical Go Virginia project. This is a project that I think is worthy of for discussion, because we are seeing requests, and there has been a couple of projects to support entrepreneurism in the K-12 system. And we do recognize, again, the importance of these types of activities, but oftentimes they are developed in a way, and that wasn't the case with this application, but I think it's worthy of discussion. They tend to be sector agnostic, right? So they tend to teach principles of entrepreneurship without an intention towards growing one or more of the targeted traded sector industries. I think they can provide exposure to entrepreneurship, and in fact, in some cases, place students with early stage firms to allow them to feel what it's like to work in a startup. But again, the outcomes, there's no formalized curriculum, there's not a credential issue, for example. So if we try to evaluate it as a startup ecosystem project, it's a little deep. And if we try to evaluate it as a workforce development project, there's no formal curriculum, there's no credential, there's no clear pathway, for example, to post-secondary education. So with that, we would recommend that the board uphold the staff decision. However, I do think it would be worthwhile, perhaps for the full board or policy governance committee, to take up this topic of entrepreneurial training and curriculum development in the K-12 system as a Go Virginia investment in the future.
I'd love to hear your all's thoughts. I have some pretty strong ones myself, but any thoughts about this?
I'll share one thought. I think it's a great idea. You can't start too early exposing students to the entrepreneurship and what it means and values. And it's just from a personal perspective. My wife actually taught entrepreneurship to first and second graders early a few years ago, and it was amazing how these young people come up with great ideas. A lot of them are related to video games and how you go about developing a business. But the whole point being, get them to think about concepts and putting together plans and things along those lines. So I think the sooner we can introduce entrepreneurship into the K-12 system, the better. It needs to be structured, it needs to be done in a way, obviously, that's positive. And so I think deferring it to our committee, discuss how we would go about it, maybe putting some criteria around it, I think would make a lot of sense. But the concept, I think, is absolutely necessary.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
Jim Chang here. This is what I teach at UVA. And I will tell you, we have some really good programs in the high school level in the state that come to UVA. But when we see the projects, this is very tough for me to say, but if there's priority in entrepreneurship, it's probably for the startups that'll have an actual project soon. And a lot of what we see because I've done at least 1,000, I've seen at least 1,000 projects in high school and college level business mind competitions. And I would say even if a fraction of a percent of those make it to actual funding, I'd be very surprised. You got to have that education out there. So Jim is absolutely right. But if there was a priority, I'd rather put it in something that could be effective now. And because there's a lot of startups that could use it now, a lot of regions that I think can use that money now. Love the idea. Maybe not something that would give us actual ROI. And of course, we don't want to be strictly ROI or anything like that. But when you look at return, hey, a lot of these young folks aren't even going to be in Virginia. They'll be in different counties. They're going to go, unfortunately, some to out-of-state colleges or something like that, or move to other places. But I love the idea. Just, I think the timing is a little early. And so I agree with the staff on this.
Okay, and again, we didn't take action on this item today, Madam Chair, but I do just present it for discussion information purposes.
well, I appreciate that. I also appreciate two things. One is that it's really good to educate young people about entrepreneurship and the value of the economy in general. I also appreciate that the schools are, struggling to have all the resources that they need to do things. But I don't really think it's Go Virginia's job to do that. I feel pretty strongly about that. And I like what you just said. We have to create some prioritization, and we're trying to get more jobs in Virginia, more high-paying jobs in Virginia. And I think we've got to be really careful about how we prioritize our dollars and what we're funding. So that's my personal point of view. Happy for the policy committee to take a look at it. And we can't take action anyway. So thank you, Sarah. These are always hard decisions. And another hard decision was, what do we do with all the requests for healthcare? And we established a healthcare task force, and Todd Conley agreed, or somehow was volunteered to head up a task force, and he did it admirably. And so, Todd, I'd love to hear your report.
Great, thank you very much. So I think, as everybody is aware, at the September meeting of the state board, we did have a very robust discussion involving the place of non-traded industry sectors within the Good Virginia program. And specifically, as Nancy said, as it relates to the healthcare industry. And that discussion did result in the formation of the healthcare task force. Before I begin reporting on the discussion, I do want to take a moment just to thank the folks that have been along and helped along the way in our discussions. I want to thank specifically Mr. Quinn and also Delegate Terry Austin for agreeing to serve on the task force and participating robustly in our first two meetings. I also want to thank Todd Oldham, who's the Research Director of BVP's Virginia Office of Education Economics, it's kind of a mouthful, as well as Anna Riggin, who's a socio-epidemiologist and shortage designation manager at the Virginia Department of Health. They provided some great information to us along the way, so we really appreciate their invaluable expertise as helping us guide the conversations that we have as a task force. The conversations that we did have as part of the task force really revolved around the role of Go Virginia and our program designed to promote growth in targeted traded industry sectors. The crux of the discussion was whether Go Virginia should, in a targeted and strategic manner, fund projects in the healthcare industry sector if the lack of healthcare availability proved to be a significant detriment or impediment to the growth of traded industry sectors. To that end, with the help of the economic development and healthcare industry experts, the task force is recommending a new policy to you today, which we believe addresses those concerns in a very targeted and strategic manner. This policy, board policy number 17, healthcare industry investments, which can be found in your board packet, creates a defined path and criteria that would need to be satisfied to allow regional councils to pursue workforce projects in the healthcare industry sector. An applying region would have to satisfy several criteria to demonstrate eligibility under this policy. Recall the JLARC report focused on eligibility. We ultimately had to decide whether or not we approve a specific project. So the eligibility criteria would be the following. First, the regional council must provide evidence that the lack of healthcare services is affecting the region's ability to grow one or more of the traded industry clusters defined in their own growth and diversification plan. So again, that's focused on evidence. There's an issue that's an impediment to growth of those traded industry clusters. Second, the majority of the participating localities based on population must have been designated as a geographic healthcare professional shortage area by the Health Resources and Services Administration, or HRSA. Third, the proposed effort must be focused on expanding the pool of qualified workers in one or more of the health occupations identified on the Virginia High Demand Occupation List as defined by the Virginia Office of Education Economics. So 2 and 3, we're actually using third-party data to validate our criteria. And the last, number 4, the region must demonstrate that there's not sufficient capacity to train workers for the identified occupations. The task force believes that the objective eligibility criteria creates a focused and strategic path for allowing healthcare projects to be pursued within the program while also remaining faithful to the original intent of the Go Virginia program to promote the growth of targeted traded industry sectors. The healthcare task force met in January, and this morning the task force did vote unanimously this morning to recommend board policy number 17 to the whole board for approval. Future meeting.
Thank you, Todd. I'm so pleased with the work that you all have done. And I think, first of all, having objective criteria and hinging it to the traded sector or growth of the traded sector makes this policy make more sense for the work that we are doing. We can't vote on this today, but this had been a pretty interesting and maybe even controversial topic in the past. So I'd love to hear any comments from the board members.
Good question.
How do you provide evidence that the lack of healthcare services what is that?
So we had a good conversation about that in our task force. We say multiple ways. One, the region itself, I mean, it could be evidence coming from employers. There are lots of ways that the region could demonstrate as part of their planning. Really, points 2 and 3 also, we would say, provide some of that evidence as well, that the majority of localities have been designated with the healthcare professional shortage area by HRSA. And then the third, that the occupations themselves are identified by the Virginia High Demand Occupation List as areas that we have those high demand occupations where there's certainly, and there are criteria around that.
I mean, having grown up in far southwest, and I know Lee County, for example, real push to reopen the hospital there. And even in my hometown, Big Stone Gap, where the hospital is down to emergency services only. I mean, I just wonder if there's identifiable data that shows, I mean, it's always been said, I know that if you have good healthcare, that it attracts industry. I'm just wondering what is that?
So that third bullet there, they actually have ratios. So you can look at primary care physicians or physician assistants the population metrics, you can look at the same behavioral health. So there are some very specific metrics that result in an occupation being identified on that list is one where you have a significant shortage.
I can see the job question in 2 and 3. The first one, as I read it, is to say, if we had better healthcare opportunities here, we'd have better industry, or we would be able to attract business.
Yeah.
That's how I read number 1.
Right.
Maybe I'm misreading number
No,
1.
you're reading correctly. We would ask for the regional council, it's not, I wouldn't call it an attestation, but essentially almost an attestation that they're attesting that the lack of healthcare services is actually an impediment
Right.
to growing what the intent of Virginia is, which is the traded industry cluster.
Right. I mean, I remember early on, there was a request that was declined because it was in healthcare sector from the Valley. I don't remember the details of it, but it had to do with I think it was training and attracting nursing. It was training nurses, wasn't it? Yeah, and I know that was difficult to not decline. It was very, because it was, the case was well made.
So there, you would agree with this, there is a shortage of healthcare workers in every region of
Oh, yeah.
Virginia. Northern Virginia, we have a significant shortage. Difference is, I think I would suggest, it is not getting in the way right now of Northern Virginia's ability
Right.
to build its traded industry clusters, where in other regions it is. And Northern Virginia would also not show up on point 2. We would not be identified by HRSA as a designated geographic health and professional shortage area.
I think the other part that we discussed in the task force meeting was numbers 2 and 3 are fairly objective across the board and apply
Right.
equally. Whereas each of the individual regions are so unique that the first item there of provide evidence gives them a little bit of ability to give a more subjective view of what they're seeing on the ground in their unique condition, but also potentially, other partners that they're working with to submit a letter explaining, we see this as an impediment. So it gives a little bit more context, maybe to the data that you're getting in 2 and 3.
And I guess that's where I'm going to, because Sarah has heard me on this before, is the letters of support are all great, written by the same author and reproduced on different letterheads.
Yeah.
And, so I would not want number 1, because you have developed very objective standards. And that's, to me, that's helpful and exactly where the kind of direction that the regional councils would be helpful to. But if you don't give more on number 1, I think what you're gonna get is, you're not gonna get evidence. And I guess I'm looking at it as evidence. And evidence is a big word for lawyers.
2 and 2 and 3, I would suggest.
Sorry, Mr.
No, I would
Director.
suggest.
Sorry to out you.
The 2 and 3 are evidential. Right? And
Yeah.
2 points, 2 and 3 are clearly evidential based on objective facts.
I just think giving.
Pia, would you be more comfortable if the words were changed a bit, maybe demonstrate instead of provide evidence? Is evidence the concern you have that there's a gestalt here, but you may not have detailed evidence?
You could say demonstrate that the lack of healthcare services is
Yeah.
affecting its ability to grow.
That's probably better, because everything else is so objective, and I appreciate giving a subjective alternative, but what is that subjective standard? And, one of the things that is said of us is that we don't give clear direction to the regional councils, and if that is gonna be misinterpreted, give it some interpretation. But I like demonstrate better.
We can't vote on this today, but we could change that wording and maybe we ask the task force just to briefly consider that first bullet as something needing to be a little more expanded.
There were 2 other comments in there, Dan, and I think a separate concept.
Well, I was just gonna say, being in economic development a lot and getting a company to say, okay, tell me 3 manufacturers that I can go to interview about this region. And what do those 3 manufacturers say about your healthcare? And and it becomes a defining part of the decision process. But it is, so I mean, you don't know what's said, or, well, I mean, you do know pretty much, I mean, you can find out, but I mean, a lot of it is, in growth and development of the region, healthcare is a critical component because that is on the checklist.
Absolutely.
And the man will say, well, you know, I'm not gonna move my executive team to your area if that's not there.
Or I can't because they won't come.
The whole conversation, you don't get to that discussion about trade and industry sectors if you don't have some foundational assets in place. Healthcare
Right.
certainly one of those.
Yeah, I think on to that point, I think BDP would be a good place to go and talk to, because, you know, this is like power and rail and water and gas. Maybe not as obvious as some of those things, but absolutely it's in the conversation for a relocation of saying, how can I, my families, my workers, find proper health care? So I think a good case could be built on this.
I think the other thing that we should remember is that healthcare workers usually are well paid compared to the region. And so it fits with our Go Virginia desire too.
So we'll go back with the chair's permission, we'll go back, take a look at that first bullet point, and then some amendments to that. And we'll also make sure, I know we have talked with BDP along the way on this, but to your comment, it's part of this, but your comments would be back. Any other
Terrific.
comments?
Okay, with no other comments, Todd, if you'll just stay there, we'd like a report from the Program Performance and Evaluation Committee, which you as our vice chair can provide for us, if you don't mind. I can't see you right now, so I hope you're still there.
All right, thank you. I heard the last quarter, the Program Performance and Evaluation Committee has met twice, and including today, we focused our efforts on 3 of the recommendations in the JLARC report. Those 3 recommendations are: 1, revised workforce and site development outcomes; secondly, reporting and closeout procedures and data validation; and then 3rd, long-term impacts tracking and program reporting requirements. For the 3 recommendations before the committee, a plan of action has been developed, including timeframes for completion. The most near-term recommendation action is the revision of workforce and site development outcomes. The JLARC report suggested that the Department of Health and Community Development staff change the number of jobs created filled outcome measure for the Go Virginia program by first splitting the criteria into separate jobs created and jobs filled measures. Second, removing the estimated and expected qualifiers so that only actual jobs created or filled are counted in reporting. And third, clarifying that any job created or filled must be attributable to the project's activities, which must be explained in the project reporting. At the direction of the committee, DHCD staff is working towards separating the jobs created filled metric into 2 different metrics, as well as adopting a clear definition for job placements, which will be aligned with the Virginia Department of Workforce Development and Advancement. This is an update to administrative guidance and has a targeted completion date by the end of this month. The second recommendation action that is underway pertains to a full review of the Go Virginia core grant outcomes. The JLARC recommendation states that revise the core grant outcomes list for Go Virginia projects to ensure that outcome measures are narrow enough to avoid mixing different program activities as clearly defined and are appropriate and specific to the project type. At the direction of the committee, DHCD staff is in the process of reviewing and developing recommended changes to the core grant outcomes. This review is targeted to be concluded and reported to the committee and the full board by the June meeting. Final release of these updated guidelines is targeted for June 24th. The third and final action underway pertains to the assessment of the long-term impact of individual projects. The JLARC report suggests that the Go Virginia board should develop and implement a policy to assess the long-term impact of individual projects and the Go Virginia program as a whole, including which information should be collected to facilitate the long-term assessment. The committee is considering a recommendation to establish both an annual survey of subgrantees as well as third-party evaluation of closed projects on a determined cycle. And again, we're looking for pattern analysis as well. Why do projects succeed? Why do projects not succeed? And what we can learn from that. The tentative goal for this recommendation is to have implementation plan in place by this September. That is on the report. And again, thanks to those that participated. You're free now to indict with please. That's the type of your portion part. So again, thank you for your participation.
Other members?
And also thank you to Sarah and team. They've done a tremendous amount of work. One thing I just reflected, the two task force did want to reflect just how much work that Sarah and team have done. You're really focusing on outcomes, being good fiduciaries for the Commonwealth in both of these areas, that we appreciate the support that they're providing to these two task force and committees. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you for all that work. And I believe there's no actions or motions that are requested for the board, just to report at this time. I want to echo your comments about the staff in particular and the good work your team's done, but your committee's done. But the JLARC report was a lot to go through last year. The JLARC report was really a positive affirmation of the important work that we do. And they had several suggestions that we've taken very seriously and are doubling down on, learning from and taking action. And I couldn't be more proud of the staff and how diligent they've been in doing this work. So thank you again. And I think Emily O'Quinn, the Chair of Governance and Policy Committee, is likewise going to talk about some of the JLARC work that their committee's doing. Emily, would you give us a report?
Indeed, yes, and thank you, Madam Chair. So over the last quarter, similarly, the Governance and Policy Committees met twice. And we, as you will recall, were tasked with reviewing and making recommendations on 9 of the JLARC recommendations. And this volume of work, of course, has been a bit much. And so we're breaking that into 2 tranches. And we talked about 5 of those recommendations today, despite some technical difficulties we had at the beginning of our meeting. Thanks to Cody's expediency, we were able to get through all 5, which were the traded sector industry definitions. Number 2, a review of higher paying jobs eligibility criteria. Number 3, growth and diversification review guidance updates. 4, expanded administrative approval authority. And 5, expansion of the Go Virginia Competitive Fund. And I'll go through high level on each of those. The first recommendation suggests that the Go Virginia Board revise its policies to include a more detailed definition of traded sector activities. And we discussed this at the committee and chose a draft definition to request that staff take and look at the documentation and policies through that lens. We are also going to look at a revision of board policy number 4, which the committee will review at the next meeting using this definition that we selected today as the most likely contender. And at that point, we can take that up as a committee and hopefully present a final recommendation to the board for the June 10th meeting. The second JLARC recommendation discussed was a suggestion that this board replace the eligibility requirement that all projects must create higher wage jobs. After DHCD staff review and the committee consideration, the committee has found that the high wage jobs are not necessarily a requirement of the Go Virginia program, but rather more an outcome of the trade sector work that we're trying to invest in. And so through that, we'd like to recommend that the staff remove the emphasis on higher paying jobs, clarify that it's not a requirement, and make some of that language a little bit clearer. To your point, that clarity is key in this. And I think that's a lot of what we're trying to address. So the completion of this guidance review and update is targeted for April 30th for this recommendation. The third recommendation from JLARC suggests that the Go Virginia Board adopt a policy that defines a cycle for full and lighter review of the regional growth and diversification plans. These updates, which are statutorily required every 2 years, have traditionally been required by the board to be complete rewrites. This can be onerous and burdensome at times, obviously. And so in discussion, the committee is recognizing that the utility of flexibility in this requirement, but recommending that DHCD staff hold some stakeholder discussions to gather information, understand from from those who are actually having to do this work, what the proper cadence would be, get some feedback there, and then come back to the committee with some additional recommendations. So we're hoping that those sessions can happen over the next quarter, and then a recommendation can come to the board at our next meeting. The fourth recommendation that we discussed was a suggestion that the Go Virginia Board revise its policies to delegate grant approval authority to the director of the Department of Housing and Community Development for any regional per capita implementation grant that has been dutifully reviewed and approved by a regional council and recommended for administrative approval by a board designated work group. The committee dug into this, and I'll say, again, echoing Todd's comments, there was a lot of work in this. It's a very detailed timeline that Cody put together to outline what it actually takes for the application to move all the way through the process. It is extensive, and the committee determined that the amount of time that it would save to accelerate this and designate that authority really was not meaningfully accelerating an approval, really just a handful of days in most situations. And so therefore, the committee is recommending no action be taken on this because we believe that the current process is sound and working as well as it can. The fifth and final JLARC recommendation that we discussed today suggests that the Go Virginia State Board expand the eligibility requirements for the competitive fund by making grants available to single regions that had obligated a majority of their per capita allocations to projects that would require a greater amount of funding than a region's unobligated per capita balance. And after review, the committee has found that the administrative guidance that was released in December, if you will recall, just one day off from the JLARC recommendations coming through, already are implementing these strategies. And so we had already taken the recommended action. And so therefore, the committee is not suggesting anything further happening for that individual recommendation. So, Madam Chair, that concludes the updates. Because these recommendations today are only requiring administrative guidance and stakeholder engagement recommendations and no vote from the board that we could not actually take today anyway, the committee is prepared to move forward in partnership with staff to continue advancing the ball on this, barring any disagreement or concern among the board. Back to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Emily. I love that. I've been talking about Go Virginia 2.0 because we're at that maturation stage where we're starting to do things a little differently. And this whole structure that we put in place this past year with our committees probably didn't realize how much work there was to do. And when Emily agreed to chair this committee, she probably didn't either. So thank you to your hardworking committee and going through these things with dispatch, but thoughtfulness. I love your report and appreciate it. Any questions or comments from the board members? All right, we'll move forward and look forward to an update for the next 4 recommendations. Well, closing in on the end of our meeting, we have some information items. Sarah, could you please discuss these? And one thing I'd ask you, Sarah, to do is comment on our next scheduled meeting because we've used June 10th in the previous report and we've written down June 11th. So just some clarity about that.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll ask my staff to provide clarity for me while I'm talking. I do want to draw to your attention some letters that were submitted by regional councils, and this was really following the issuance of the JLARC report. These were sent to Nancy, and we wanted to make sure that the full board got an opportunity to read these and reflect upon them. So the first one came from Go Virginia, specifically Go Virginia 6. But I think most impressively, there was a joint letter from all 9 regional councils, either a chair, I think maybe in one case, a vice chair, maybe someone was out of town that day. But I think it really just speaks to the opportunities that we have to continue to collaborate and strengthen our relationships with the regional councils. Leah, this is potentially your charge. So I think what we see here is a group of business leaders who very, very much want to engage and to be part of the Virginia solution and make their unique regional contributions. So very excited about that. Region 6, I think, had some very thoughtful things to say about some of the recommendations in the JLARC study. They are already on the docket to be explored by one or more of the committees that have been formed here. So we look forward for an opportunity to respond to them. You also see some administrative approved projects in the stack. Project for Region 1 related to agriculture. Region 1 is also pursuing, as many regions are. Sorry, Billy was giving me a worried face, so I wasn't sure if I was on the wrong thing.
Listening.
Region.
That's all we saw.
Region 1 and a number of other regions, including Region 9, are starting this next phase site identification process, which I think is really exciting. So they're already beginning to say what's next as it relates to site development. We need to get out early and get in front of some of these emerging opportunities. We did see a pilot project from applicant Future Kings. They have been recommended to come back. And that project has been approved administratively. That's for Region 7. And then I'd also like to draw to attention a really exciting project in Region 8, the Blue Mountain RIFA feasibility study. For folks that are not familiar with the acronym RIFA, it is a Regional Industrial Facility Authority. It is a legal instrument, organizational structure that would allow cost share and benefit share. So multiple localities could all invest in the improvements of a site, for example, regional significance. And many of these arrangements include provisions for tax sharing, revenue sharing. So we're excited to see this moving forward, and you know that Blue Mountain site is very interesting. The summary on page 35 just shows you, there's got to be 10 or 12 localities that are all participating in form of action on this effort. So look forward to seeing what good things come there. You also see a memo with just a report to our Q2 FY24 fiscal report. And again, we're required to provide, and this is really what I call the resource utilization report, to Senate and Finance Money Committee staff. What are the funds available for future projects? That is in some ways the question we're answering, as well as what projects have been approved and funded using the resource. We are also asked to provide end of quarter fund balances for each of the region and for the statewide competitive fund. So those are on LIS. If you guys are ever up at night wondering what's our most recent statement of funds available for future awards, that is where you will find that. We are also monitoring 30 projects in the development pipeline. So the 3 staff you see here who do all the hard work are each assigned 3 Go Virginia regions, and they work with the support organization staff, and maybe you guys could raise your hand. I know we've got Nancy, Tina, and Shannon are all here. And so oftentimes it takes multiple cycles for these projects to really mature, right? It goes from a letter of interest, it starts to become a project, it starts to have a budget, you start to really understand how it's going to be resourced from a match perspective. That takes a series of grant cycles, not atypically, particularly for complex projects. And this staff provides technical assistance to support the development. 30 projects with an estimated request of $23.7 million in the pipeline right now. And I'm excited. These are projects in controlled environment, agriculture, life science, biotech, information technology. And I will just say many of these are have multi-regional implications. So I'm really excited to be continuing to support those projects in their development. So if anybody has questions about that, please reach out at any time. And Madam Chair, that concludes my summary report of the information I received.
Thank you, Sarah. Questions or comments? Well, thank you again to everyone. And as we adjourn, I'll just remind us that we will work with staff to find a prompt way to have a future meeting where we can take action on the things we've talked about today. And we have our meeting schedule for the rest of the year. We were going to try to bounce between virtual and in person. I know that a lot of us like virtual meetings, but it's also fantastic to get together. The rule is, as I understand it, that you cannot have two virtual meetings back to back. And so that's why we've tried to adjust and offer both as our meeting schedule moves forward. We may have to alter that just given the need to have a meeting in between now and June to take action. So we'll get back to you. But Sarah, did you clarify, is our next meeting June 11 or June 10?
The 11th is the Tuesday and the
Okay.
17th.
All right. So that's our working thesis for our next meeting, but we will have some sort of meeting in between to take action. Anything else for the good of the group? Well, we've had a good meeting. I wish you all safe drives home, and we'll look forward to talking again soon. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
It is another. Yeah.